Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock with you. And we are continuing our series here on the podcast. Of course, we're putting up a series of posts at cleveland.com/Browns, going over 15 topics leading into training camp, all sorts of things, quarterbacks, wide receivers, defense, and anything you could ask for, getting you ready for training camp. So check those out. All this month at cleveland.com/Browns. And of course, we're going to do some pods on some of these topics as well. So today we are going to talk Todd Monken. Of course, over the spring, we talked a lot about Todd Monken, a lot about his approach, his sort of culture changing approach to this football team, maybe the right guy at the right time for this team. Mary Kay, when we talk about Todd Monken, I think we always have to start with this idea of it was such a strange. I don't think anyone had actually bet on like Todd Monken getting hired necessarily when this whole process started, but he was one of the first people they interviewed. He was obviously in this process throughout. He was always sort of hovering over it while everybody was trying to talk themselves into Grant Udinski and Nate Scheelhaus and all these young guys. There was Todd Monken just kind of there. And ultimately that's the direction the Browns went. I think some fans were a little bit like, really, that's where they're going with this thing. But I don't know. After this offseason program and everything we saw, it feels like Todd Monken has a chance. Now we'll see obviously what happens when these games start. But I think, a few months after this hire, having actually seen him coach this football team, it feels like he's got a chance here to maybe be one of those surprise candidates nobody was necessarily thinking about, but maybe the Browns did find something here.
Well, I think we've seen some notable differences in Todd Monken that are pretty easy to describe. He is all about the work. He's not going to be giving the veterans any days of rest. If they're not practicing, it's going to be because they're injured. They're truly injured. None of this sort of country club day off sort of thing for the veterans. And then I think he's going to be a lot tougher on the players in general, just very, very strict with them. And we've heard him yelling a lot. He doesn't tolerate sloppy football. He doesn't tolerate mistakes. So I think he's going to bring a culture of getting it right and being a perfectionist about things. And I think that will really help him. We've seen him grab Shador Sanders after a drill and yell at him. We've seen him correcting other players really hard. We've seen him yelling at coaches when he has to, right? I mean, he is bringing the hammer down on this team and trying to elevate the level of professionalism out on the football field. And I think those are some of the things that are a little bit different about him right now.
Yeah, and I just think Ashley, we've talked about this a little bit on this pod, just through the whole Jim Schwartz thing and what some of the defensive players were saying when that was all going down at the end of the season, that want to be coached, I guess, that want to be held accountable and a little more accountability, and how some of the defensive players specifically were talking about that. And listen, I think most great players want to be coached, and they want to be coached hard, and they want to have the best brought out of them. And I think just from that standpoint, based on what we've seen so far, Todd Monken checks that box, and I think players will respond to that positively.
I think so too. I mean, I think it was something that those guys felt like was missing. And I do think from the defensive players side of things, especially, that's a group that they had a lot change, like especially over the last year and getting some younger guys in there. There was that sneaky sort of youth movement. But over the last like 3-year combined period, this was one of or the best defense in football. And for the last 2 seasons, the offense and special teams gave them no help and or actively hindered them. Look no further than obviously the Jets game for the best special teams example of that last year. So I think it, to me, was not surprising that it felt like some of that started to crack towards the end of last season, because for these guys, I remember even Grant Delpit had that quote the one time about, like, we know how it's going to go. Like, we know what we have to do to win. And like the reality was, they were playing on a team where the other side of the ball wasn't going to get them more than 16 or 17 points most of the time the last couple of years. So I do think that accountability thing and that sort of old school style of thinking. Like Todd Monken just naturally is able to blend old school and new school in a lot of ways. And it's his background as a coach and his experience. And, I think the fact that he's spent a lot of time in college recently, coaching at Georgia as well, and then going with John Harbaugh, who we know how influential he's been on his career and his sort of style. So I definitely think that we're going to see more of that.
Yeah, and I do think just going back to when they hired him, and this is something I thought about, and we talked about it on the pod a little bit after the hire, just this idea of who Todd Monken is. And, even if you don't go back to his time at Tampa, where he did a really nice job with Jameis Winston, obviously. But even if you just go back to starting at Georgia and the last 6 years of his career and sort of what he's accomplished, and if you took those 6 years and you gave it to somebody who was 35 or 40 years old, that guy would be one of the hottest coaching candidates in football. The difference with Todd is, sometimes a guy like this who's older, who's been in our lives for a long time, who obviously Browns fans remember and associate him, I think, a lot with 2019 and kind of how miserable things were then and how miserable he was then. I think people are sort of overlooking that resume a little bit. But Mary Kay, the reality with Todd is, really good offensive coordinator at Georgia. They won national titles. Goes to Baltimore, was an offensive coordinator. Lamar Jackson has some of his best years. Continues his development as a passer. Wins another MVP award. I mean, just that resume alone at least tells you there's a chance that Todd Monken could be a really good coach. It's just, instead of being 35 or 40, he's 60, and that can be a harder sell to a fan base.
Yeah, it really can be. But as you guys have noted, if you watch what he has done since he left here in 2019, he's really bolstered his resume, his coaching repertoire. He's figured so many things out. He's worked with different kinds of quarterbacks. He's dealt with many, many different kinds of personalities. He had a very challenging situation here when he had to navigate Freddie Kitchens and Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. And that was kind of a mess. And he had to navigate that whole situation. I know he learned a lot from that. Then he goes to Georgia and he had to work. He worked with Stetson Bennett. He had to figure some things out there just in terms of how to work with another different style of quarterback. And to have that kind of success where you're winning national championships, that's pretty incredible. To learn so much from Kirby Smart and then to take all of that and move it over to Baltimore, where a lot of people don't realize that Lamar Jackson can be very difficult to coach. And I know that they had their issues over the years, but he nevertheless got the best out of Lamar Jackson. And that's a tough place to coach over there. The standards are high and you have to win. That's what's expected of you every single season. And so he learned so much there and so much from John Harbaugh that I just think that they are getting a much, much better coach than they would have if he were his 55-year-old version of himself.
Yeah, and on top of that too, when we talk a little bit about like, just this idea of if you took his resume from the last 6 years and gave it to whoever, Grant Udinski or Shieldhouse or Tommy Reese or somebody like that, so that guy would be a super hot coaching candidate. I do think the other side of that, Ashley, is like, I think we've seen all spring, he's equipped to kind of handle all of the things that the Cleveland Browns can throw at you. Whether it's trading your best defensive player or answering questions about Brendan Sorsby or just all the chaos that this organization can throw at you at times. Like, he's 60 years old. He's been around. He's seen it. He's unfazed by all of this stuff. He doesn't have a deer in the headlights look. And I've wondered, how would one of those young guys have handled some of these situations? How would they have handled Myles Garrett not being there and answering a million questions about it? And then he gets traded, 10 minutes after you talked at the golf outing. Like, I think that's another thing, that because he's been around and because it's just all about ball with him, he's able to handle this. He's equipped for this. He's built to handle this job.
He is. I mean, think about all the things that have happened with this football team since January, and it is crazy. I mean, that's always just, I think, life covering the Browns or following the Browns if you're a fan. But we were talking in the winter when they hired Todd Monken, and then almost immediately there is all this news and noise about Jim Schwartz and how unhappy Jim is and how he supposedly packed up his office and told everyone he wasn't coming back after he got passed over for the head coaching job. And Todd Monken in February, what's supposed to be, this happy introductory press conference, like the first thing he has to do is answer all these questions about, hey, what's going on with your defensive coordinator? Because all of this that we've heard about, they want Jim to stay on sort of no matter what. And now Jim left in very dramatic fashion. And it's your introductory press conference, your first time as head coach. And that's the stuff you have to answer. And then add in Myles Garrett, and then add in the quarterback, and then add in Brendan Sorsby, all this stuff that is sort of followed. So I do think at the end of the day, immediately when the Jim Schwartz stuff happened, I was like, well, thank God they didn't hire one of these 30 somethings, because I'm a 30 something and I wouldn't know how to answer all those Jim Schwartz questions. So I think he has done a really good job. He's done it in his own way, without those sort of robotic answers that Kevin Stefanski, I think, would give in the same situations.
Now, the other part of this, Mary Kay, that's going to be interesting to see once these games start, and we'll get glimpses of it in training camp, is, Todd offensively is very much known for not bringing a system, right? There's not like a Todd Monken system that's coming. Like there would have been, like what the Browns had with Kevin Stefanski, what they would have had with maybe some other coaches. He's known for being very adaptable. He's known for kind of bringing out the best in some of his players. And that's the part that I'm most interested in. Like, how does that look on this football team? How does that look for a guy like, so for like Quinshon Judkins, right? It's okay. You're a running back. You're going to run the football. But like, how does it look for a guy like Dylan Sampson or one of the stars of spring, Isaiah Bond? Can he find something? Can he get something out of Sed Tillman? Right? It's some of these guys that might be on the roster bubble. Can he make those guys a little better, or find something to make this offense work a little better, make some of these individuals better players in this offense? So that's what I'm most interested in as we kind of move forward with Todd Monken, is how is he going to find ways, and that's without even mentioning the guys that like Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, the guys that were brought here and are expected to contribute. How's he going to unlock some of these other guys, and what sort of opportunities is he going to give them to maybe revive their careers, get their careers going, whatever it is? That's part of the reason why they hired him and liked him.
Well, he has so much to draw from. He's worked with so many different styles of quarterbacks. And I think the key with Todd in this situation is he's going to have to sort of have one philosophy or game plan for Deshaun Watson and another one for Shedeur Sanders. Not completely different, but you're going to be able to run more RPOs, more designed runs, more opportunities for Deshaun Watson to play with his feet than you would for Shedeur Sanders, although he has shown plenty enough mobility to run the keepers and do some certain things like that. But he, for all intents and purposes, is going to be running two separate offenses. But I think that's key. He's been able to do that. Again, he coached Baker Mayfield here, which he seems more to be in the Shedeur mold. And then he's coached Lamar, who seems to be more in the Deshaun mold. Now, vastly different quarterbacks we're talking about in all respects here, but he can pull from all of these different experiences. He's run the air raid in college, and those are concepts that Deshaun Watson is very, very familiar with. The spread, four verts, all those kinds of things. Those are things that Deshaun has done. But I think one of the key things when we're talking about Todd Monken with the quarterbacks is the fact that he generally likes to put a lot of responsibility on the quarterback. Quarterback as point guard, let him go out there and run the show. Let him call the audibles, change the protections, change the lineup, change the motion, the play, whatever. He lets him have autonomy at that line of scrimmage and on the field. And that's going to be key here, because whichever quarterback demonstrates that they can handle all of that responsibility the best, I think that they're going to have an edge to win the competition.
Yeah, and I think that's also why it's so important to just obviously we have to judge this based on what we see at practice, and people are out there watching clips on Twitter, and like a guy makes a great throw or a great play. They're watching this, quarterback tracker every day. Like a lot of that isn't, that matters. And that's part of this whole competition. But like, it's also Ashley stuff we're not going to be able to see. So it's stuff that's happening in these meeting rooms. It's stuff that's happening in walkthroughs. It's who's picking up on the offense quicker than the other guy. So certainly the on-field performance is going to matter, and you've got to be able to take the classroom to the grass. But there also is just a lot we're not going to see as he's making this decision about who he wants to go with his starting quarterback.
No, I mean, we can never get the full picture with these things. And like, I do think that that's sort of why last year that there were all these sort of conspiracy theories, right, that developed like regarding Shador Sanders and what was happening. And we've talked at length about how we don't believe that that stuff was true. But when you can't see it with your own eyes, like I think for fans, it makes it more difficult. But there's a lot more than just these open practices that Todd Monken is going to have to judge this thing on. And again, with his sort of resume and experience and the number of quarterbacks he's worked with and their varying, incredibly varying skill sets and having to design offenses, I think like he is somebody that is going to be able to put whoever that person is in a position to succeed based on what they're good at. And I think that's a good thing for the Browns.
Okay, so as we kind of look at this situation, and obviously, we'll see what happens when we get to these game days. Maybe we get into these games and Todd Monken is terrible at clock management and burns his timeouts, and maybe he's not the guy. I don't think that's going to be the case. But that's ultimately what he'll be judged on, Mary Kay. That being said, I guess what is what do you want to see from Todd Monken? What is your, even just beyond a win total, like what do you want to see from Todd Monken as we go through these weeks, as we get into the grind of the season, as this team tries to navigate 17 games with some quarterback uncertainty, who knows, obviously first time defensive coordinator, all of this stuff. What are the things you're watching for from Todd Monken that'll make you say, I think this guy, I think the Browns got the right guy here?
Well, they hired him for his offensive chops, for his ability to put points on the board and to field an explosive offense. So, what I'm looking for from him, and in some respects, it's going to be pulling a rabbit out of a hat a little bit. But what I'm looking for from him is to somehow take this very, very young offense, this brand new scheme, and turn it into an explosive, effective, efficient point scoring offense. That's the charge. That's what he has to do. It's a tall order, especially if they start a young quarterback in Shador Sanders and he's trying to hold it all together. But I think you have to take Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston and Isaiah Bond and all of these young guys and a brand new offensive line. And you have to go down to Jacksonville in week 1 and field a respectable offense that can score 22 or 23 points. If you can do that, then you can win some games. That's what they paid him to do. That's why they hired him. That's why they're paying him $10 million a year over 5 years. They're giving him $50 million to go out there and show them some offense. And even though he has a very, very young unit, probably the youngest in the NFL, that's what I want to see, if he can pull that off.
Yeah, and just like I want to watch the offense and just have an idea of what they're trying to do. And so look, I think some of it over the last couple of years was certainly talent and the quarterback situation, and it's hard if you don't have the answer at quarterback or you don't have a guy at quarterback that you trust. But I just want to be able to watch this offense. I mean, in those early Kevin Stefanski years, it was fun. Like they were running trick plays and they were like, it was fun to watch those offenses. And then the last 2 years, it was just an absolute grind for a lot of different reasons. And so, Ashley, I want to see that development. To Mary Kay's point about the young players over the course of the year, I want to walk away feeling like the arrow is pointing up on a bunch of these guys. That's really, those are the things I'm watching for with Todd.
Yeah, that development of these young guys is really going to be key because you think about these last 2 draft classes and I mean, the Browns have to be hoping that there are numerous franchise sort of players in here. This is like that second Super Bowl window that they are aiming for. You need those guys to leave 2026 better than they were last year or improved as rookies from April until January, February, whatever. So I think that is the biggest thing. And that's like when we talk about him deciding this quarterback battle, it's going to be that balance of not just like best guy for the job, but hey, how are you going to make sure the development of everyone is being facilitated in the right way to create this sort of noticeable change? Because that's how you get better. And look, if you don't solve the quarterback problem this year as head coach, then at least Todd Monken will be able to leave saying, you know what, these key offensive players got better, like Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion, Harold Fannin, and Quinshon Judkins better in year two. We feel like we have something on the O line, even though we started with 5 different starters. So I think it really comes down to that sort of development stuff this year.
I want to make one more point here before we wrap this up. I do think one thing that's going to be good for this football team too with Todd is like he, again, it's going back. I hate to harp on that age, but again, he's 60 years old, right? He doesn't have a ton of time here. This is his chance. This is his opportunity. And he's not going to be sometimes you get these young offensive head coaches and they almost want to show off a little bit. It's almost like, hey, look what I came up with. Look what I did. Look at this scheme I'm running. I don't know if Todd is gonna be like that. Like Todd is gonna come in and like he's here to win, and that's the only thing on his mind. You know, what was the line at one of his pressers? Like, if you know the best way to change the culture is to win. So I think Mary Kay in that sense too. He's going to be good for this team because there's going to be a little bit of a sense of urgency. There's going to be a little bit of a like we got to start winning and we got to start winning fast. And I'm not here to become a star on social media because of these great plays I drew up. I'm here to win football games, however that has to happen. And I think that approach, that sort of desperation's not the right word, but that urgency, I think that's going to be good for this team.
Yeah, there's going to be definitely a high intensity training camp coming up. They are not going to waste any reps whatsoever. They have so much work to do to get ready to go out there and actually play football games. And of course, we know they don't know who their quarterback is yet. And that makes it very, very difficult to turn it into a well oiled machine for opening day when you're not even repping it over and over and over with your starter yet. And he does not have a high tolerance for sloppy football, for bad football, for any of that kind of stuff. So I think we're going to see a very, very efficient training camp with just plenty of corrections, plenty of situational football. It's going to be like nothing we've seen in a while.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like Todd is probably just going to live in the office all of July. Who knows? I don't even know if he ever goes on vacation. Like Ashley, he's going to be all about football. And again, I think just having that urgency and just having a guy who understands, like he has to understand the moment he's in. I think that'll help this team.
Yeah, I think it will too. And yeah, I would love to hear Todd Monken's answer to a question about what are you going to do during the dead period? Because, I mean, we've heard him talk so much about this. I think for Todd Monken, there's no such thing as vacation when you love football as much as he does, right? So, yeah, I think you're going to sort of feel that different energy that I think you can only get when you do have someone who is a bit more seasoned in their career and who hasn't had this opportunity before. Like, we know how much this means to him and how long he's been waiting. So I definitely think that's a huge part of his story going forward.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there here, Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Find us on all your socials. Look for Orange and Brown Talk. Give us a like and a follow. And of course, find us on YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.